The knock on the boarding house door came just after sunset, hard enough to rattle the thin wood and make Clara Bennett's heart jump into her throat. She already knew it was bad news. In a town like Red Willow, Colorado, no one knocked like that unless they were bringing trouble or collecting debt. Clara folded the last of her dresses into a small trunk before she opened the door. The decision had already been made that afternoon. The school would close. The mines had slowed. Families were leaving. There were only 5 children left in her classroom, and 5 did not justify her wages. The town council had spoken kindly, but kindness did not pay rent. When she opened the door, Mr. Abernathy from the council stood there, with his hat in his hands and regret in his eyes. "I'm sorry, Miss Bennett," he said softly. "And you have until Sunday." She nodded once. She did not cry. She did not beg. "I understand," she answered. He left quickly, as if her calm dignity made it worse. Clara closed the door and leaned against it. The boarding house hallway was quiet. The other tenants had already begun avoiding her gaze. A jobless woman in a struggling town was a reminder of how close they all were to the same fate. She had arrived in Red Willow 2 years earlier with a teaching certificate, a suitcase, and a belief that she could make a difference. She believed children needed stories and structure, and someone who saw more than their rough hands and dusty boots. Now she had 3 days before she would have no income and no place to sleep. Her parents were gone. No brothers, no husband, no land. Only pride. Outside, the wind moved across the prairie in long, lonely gusts. It carried the smell of coming rain. A second knock came, deeper, firmer. Not from the council. Clara straightened. When she opened the door again, the hallway seemed to shrink around the man standing there. Jacob Turner filled the doorway without trying. Tall, broad, shoulders built by years of ranch work, dark coat still dusty from the trail. His hat cast a shadow over eyes that were sharp and steady and impossible to ignore. Everyone in 3 counties knew Jacob Turner, owner of Turner Ranch, the largest cattle spread in southern Colorado. A man who negotiated with railroad men without blinking. A widower for 4 years. Father of 2 boys no one could control. He did not remove his hat. "Miss Bennett," he said in a low, even voice. May I have a word?" Her fingers tightened around the edge of the door. "It's late, Mr. Turner." "It won't take long." There was no rudeness in him, only certainty. She stepped aside. He entered the small hallway, bringing with him the scent of leather and wind and open land. He removed his gloves slowly, studying the worn wallpaper, the narrow staircase, the oil lamp that flickered too weak for comfort. "I heard about the school," he said. "News travels quickly." "It does." Silence stretched between them. Clara crossed her arms lightly. "If you've come to offer charity, I will save you the trouble." His eyes lifted to hers fully then, and something in his expression shifted. "I have not come to offer charity." "Then why are you here?" He inhaled once, steadying himself. "I need a mother for my sons," he said plainly. "And you need shelter." The words struck like cold water. For a moment she thought she had misunderstood. "I beg your pardon. My boys," he continued calmly. "Ethan is 9. Caleb is 7. Since their mother passed, they have grown wild, angry. They fight. They refuse instruction. They chase off every housekeeper I hire." Clara stared at him. "And that concerns me because I have watched you with the children in town," he said. "You do not scare easy. You do not raise your voice without reason. You see what is underneath their trouble. And you think I can fix your sons. I think they need someone who will not give up on them. She let out a breath that trembled despite her effort to stay steady. "You are proposing marriage," she said quietly. "Yes." Her pulse pounded in her ears. "This is not a joke." "No." "This is not romantic." "No." Her throat tightened. "You do not love me." He did not hesitate. "No." The honesty was almost cruel, yet it steadied her. "And I do not love you," she replied. "I know." Outside, thunder rolled far across the plains. "You would have your own room," he continued. "Authority over the household, financial security, respect, my name. In return, you would guide my sons, care for them, or be their mother. You speak of marriage like a business agreement." "It is," he said simply. Clara turned away from him and looked at her trunk on the bed upstairs, half packed. 3 days. After that, she would have nowhere. Pride did not build fires. Pride did not buy bread. "And if I refuse?" she asked. "Then I wish you well," he said. "But winter will not." The words were not a threat. They were truth. She faced him again. "Why me?" "Because you stayed after school to help children who could not pay fees," he answered. "Because you mended coats without telling anyone. Because when Thomas Reed broke a window, you did not strike him. You made him help fix it." She swallowed. "You have been watching me." "I watch what matters." The rain began, sudden and hard against the roof, and her life had never included marriage proposals from powerful ranchers. She had once imagined love, soft words, shared laughter, choice. Now she stood at a crossroad shaped by survival. "When?" she asked. "Tonight," he said. "The storm will worsen. My carriage is waiting." Her heart raced so loud she wondered if he could hear it. "If I agree," she said carefully, "I will not be decorative. I will not be ignored. If I mother your sons, I will truly mother them." A flicker moved through his eyes. Not anger, not doubt. Respect. "I would expect nothing less." The decision rose inside her before fear could stop it. "I will do it," she said. The words changed everything. He nodded once, as if sealing a contract. Within an hour, Clara Bennett left the boarding house with one trunk and no certainty about the future. The Turner Ranch appeared through sheets of rain like a fortress against the dark. Wide porches, strong beams, lanterns glowing in high windows. It stood solid against the storm, untouched by the weakness that had chased her from town. 2 boys waited in the main hall. Ethan stood straight, already tall for his age, jaw set in challenge. Caleb hovered behind him, smaller, curls falling into guarded eyes. Jacob removed his coat. "Boys," he said evenly, "this is Miss Bennett." "She ain't our teacher," Ethan muttered. "No," Jacob replied. "She is your mother now." The word fell heavy. Caleb stepped backward. Ethan did not move. "You can't just replace her," Ethan said, voice tight. Clara knelt so she was eye level with him. "I am not replacing anyone," she said gently. "Your mother belongs to you, always." "I am simply here." Ethan studied her with open doubt. "You won't last," he said. The challenge was clear. The first morning proved him nearly right. Ethan refused breakfast. Caleb spilled milk on purpose. When Clara attempted reading time, Ethan walked out. When she followed him to the barn, he kicked a bucket hard enough to dent it. "I don't have to listen to you," he said. "You do," she answered calmly. "Not because I demand it, but because your father asked me to guide you. You married him for money." The word stung more than she expected. "I married him because I believed this family deserved a chance." He laughed without humor. Caleb wet the bed that night and cried quietly, ashamed. Clara cleaned it without scolding. She sat beside him until his breathing steadied. By the third day, the servants watched her closely, expecting her to leave. Jacob said little. He observed from doorways, from the head of the table, from the shadows of the stable. On the fifth evening, Clara found Ethan outside in the rain, standing alone near the fence line. "You'll get sick," she said softly. He did not turn. "She used to stand here," he said. "Mama, she said the land looked endless." Clara stepped beside him. "It does," she agreed. "She sang when storms came," he added. Her chest tightened. "What did she sing?" He hesitated, then hummed a broken melody. Clara listened carefully, memorizing every note. That night, when thunder shook the ranch house, Caleb trembled in bed. Clara sat beside him and sang the tune Ethan had shared. His small fingers curled into her sleeve. The house felt different after that. Not softer, but less empty. Ethan still tested her. He ignored chores. He slammed doors. He muttered that she would leave like the others. Instead of anger, she gave him work. Real work. Fixing fences. Feeding horses. Building shelves. "Strength grows when you use it," she told him. Slowly, resistance turned into effort. Jacob noticed. Weeks passed. Laughter began to return in small bursts. Caleb started asking her to braid his curls out of his eyes. Ethan began lingering during reading hour, pretending not to care. One evening at supper, Ethan asked if she would attend his writing lesson. "I would be honored," she said. Jacob looked at her across the table, something unreadable in his expression. This marriage had been formed from necessity, from survival. Yet something quieter was taking root. Clara no longer felt like a guest in the house, and Jacob no longer felt like a stranger across the table. But neither of them spoke of it. Outside, the prairie stretched wide and uncertain. Inside, a fragile beginning had formed, and none of them yet understood how fragile it truly was. The first real trouble came in the early spring, when the snow melted too fast and the river began to rise. Clara felt the tension before anyone said a word. Men rode in and out of the ranch yard with tight faces. The sky stayed gray for days. The wind shifted warm and restless. Even the horses stamped harder in their stalls. At breakfast one morning, Ethan barely touched his plate. "What is it?" Clara asked gently. "The river is swelling," he said. "If it floods, we lose the lower pasture." Jacob did not look up from his coffee. "We will handle it." But Clara heard what he did not say. Flood meant lost cattle. Lost cattle meant lost income. And even the richest rancher in 3 counties was not untouched by bad seasons. That afternoon, Jacob left before sunset with half his men to reinforce the riverbank. Clara stood on the porch with the boys, watching the riders disappear into the mist. "You scared?" Caleb whispered. "No," she said calmly. But she was. Not of the river, of what strain could do to a marriage built on careful balance. By nightfall, rain began again. Heavy. Relentless. Ethan paced the hall like a caged colt. "He should have taken me," he muttered. "You are 9, Clara replied. "I'm not a baby." "No," she agreed. "You are not." Thunder shook the windows. Caleb pressed close to her side. Clara kept her voice steady. "Your father knows what he is doing." But hours passed. No lantern light appeared on the road. Near midnight, a rider finally emerged through the rain. Not Jacob. one of the ranch hands. His face was pale. Clara stepped forward before he reached the porch. "What happened?" "The river broke through the west embankment," he said. "Mr. Turner's still out there with the men. They're trying to move the herd to higher ground." Her stomach dropped. Ethan heard every word. "I'm going," he said instantly. "No," Clara answered sharply. "He could get swept away. And so could you." Ethan's jaw clenched. "You don't get to tell me what to do." "I do," she said firmly, "because I am responsible for you. You're not my real mother." The words cut deep, but Clara did not step back. "Real mothers protect their children," she said quietly. "And tonight, that is what I'm doing." Ethan stared at her, eyes burning with anger and fear mixed together. For a moment she thought he might run anyway. Instead, he turned and slammed his bedroom door. Caleb began to cry. Clara held him close and sang the storm song again, though her own voice trembled. It was nearly dawn when Jacob returned. Mud covered his coat. His face was tight with exhaustion. But he was standing. Clara met him at the door before he could even remove his gloves. "You're hurt," she said, seeing the cut along his forehead. "It's nothing." "It is not nothing." She led him to the kitchen table, cleaned the wound with steady hands while the boys hovered nearby. Ethan tried to act indifferent, but his relief was obvious. "We lost part of the lower pasture," Jacob said quietly. "But the herd is safe. That is what matters," Clara replied. His eyes met hers, and something unspoken passed between them. Gratitude. Trust. The next weeks were harder. Repairing fences, counting losses, meeting with suppliers. Jacob carried the weight of it heavily. He became quieter at supper, more distant in the evenings. Clara felt the change like a shift in the air before another storm. One night, after the boys were asleep, she found him alone in the study staring at account books. "You don't have to carry this alone," she said. He did not look up. "It is my responsibility." "It is our ranch," she corrected softly. That made him pause. "Our," he repeated. "Yes." He leaned back in his chair, rubbing a hand over his face. "I made a practical decision when I married you," he said. "I thought I was solving one problem. I did not consider what would happen if I began to care." Her breath caught. "You regret it." "No," he said immediately. Silence filled the room. "I'm not used to sharing burdens," he admitted. "You are not alone anymore," she said. The words felt dangerous, because they were true. But the valley had begun whispering again. At church the following Sunday, Clara felt the stares. Women who once greeted her warmly now nodded with thin smiles. "She married up quickly," someone murmured just loud enough to hear. "For shelter," another replied. Clara kept her back straight. Ethan heard too. On the ride home, he was unusually quiet. That evening, he burst into the kitchen, fists clenched. "Billy Harper said you trapped Pa," he said angrily. Said you just wanted his money." Clara set down the flour she had been sifting. "And what did you say?" Ethan hesitated. "I punched him." Jacob, who had just entered, stiffened. "You what?" "He was lying," Ethan shot back. Jacob's voice turned stern. "Violence solves nothing." He insulted her. The words hung heavy. Clara looked at Ethan carefully. "You defended me," she said. His cheeks reddened. He was wrong. Jacob studied his son in silence. Then he said something Clara did not expect. "Your mother would have been proud that you stood for someone," he said quietly. "But she would also expect you to stand with control." Ethan swallowed. Clara saw it then. The shift. He no longer saw her as temporary. He saw her as part of his world. Later that night, as she folded laundry, Jacob approached her slowly. "You have earned more than I anticipated," he said. "What does that mean?" "My sons would fight for you." Her throat tightened. "They do not need to fight," she replied. "They only need to feel safe." He stepped closer than usual. "And do you feel safe here?" She looked at him honestly. "Yes." The word carried weight, because she had not expected it to be true. Days warmed into early summer. The ranch began to heal. Grass grew back over damaged land. At the river calmed. Laughter echoed more often. But peace rarely lasts long in a place shaped by wind and hardship. One evening, a carriage rolled up the long dirt drive. Clara stood on the porch beside Jacob as it stopped. A woman stepped out. Tall, elegant, dressed in city fashion, far finer than anything worn in Red Willow. Her eyes were sharp and familiar. "Jacob," she said coolly. Clara felt his body go still beside her. "Margaret," he replied. The name meant nothing to Clara, until Margaret's gaze shifted to her. "So, this is the replacement," the woman said. Clara felt the word like a slap. Ethan and Caleb appeared behind them on the porch. Margaret smiled tightly. "I am their aunt," she said, "and I have come to discuss custody." The world seemed to tilt. Jacob's jaw hardened. "Darn, that was settled years ago." "It can be reopened," Margaret replied smoothly. "Especially if I argue that my nephews are being raised by a woman who married their father for convenience." Clara's heart pounded. The whispers, the rumors, weaponized. Margaret stepped closer. "I have resources, Jacob. Lawyers, influence, a proper home in Denver." Ethan moved closer to Clara without realizing it. Jacob's voice turned cold. "My sons are not for negotiation." Margaret's eyes flicked to Clara again. "We will see." As the carriage door shut behind her and she was escorted inside, Clara felt something she had not felt since the night she lost her job. Fear, not for herself, but for the fragile family she had helped rebuild. And for the first time, she understood that this marriage would be tested not just by storms of weather, but by storms of blood and pride. And this time, love alone might not be enough. Margaret did not waste time. By morning, word had already spread through Red Willow that the boy's aunt from Denver had arrived with lawyers and intentions. Clara felt the shift in the air before breakfast was even cleared. Margaret sat at the long dining table as if she already owned the place. Her posture was straight, her gloves placed neatly beside her plate, her eyes sharp and measuring. "I only want what is best for my nephews," she said smoothly. Ethan's fork scraped loudly against his plate. "You don't even know us," he muttered. Margaret ignored him. A proper education, a cultured environment, stability, she continued. Not this rough ranch life. Caleb's small hand slipped into Clara's. Clara squeezed back gently. Jacob's voice was calm but firm. "They have stability." "From a schoolteacher who lost her position?" Margaret replied. The insult landed exactly where she intended. Clara felt heat rise in her chest, but she did not react. She had learned that storms grow stronger when fed. Margaret continued. "I will be filing a petition. The court in Denver will consider my claim." Ethan stood abruptly. "You can't take us," he said, voice shaking. Margaret smiled in a way that did not reach her eyes. "We will let the judge decide." That night, after the boys were asleep, Clara stood alone on the porch. The prairie stretched wide and quiet under the moonlight. Jacob joined her. "This is my fault," he said quietly. "I underestimated her." "You did what you believed was right," Clara answered. "She will attack your character, your past, your reasons for marrying me." Clara looked out across the dark fields. Then we tell the truth, she said. And if the truth is not enough. She turned to him fully. Do you regret marrying me? His answer came without hesitation. No. Then we stand together. The court hearing was set for 2 weeks later in Colorado Springs. 2 weeks filled with whispers. 2 weeks of townspeople watching. 2 weeks of Ethan trying to act brave and failing. One evening, Clara found him in the barn, sitting alone in the hay. She's going to take us, he said. No, Clara replied gently. She has money. Fancy words. We just have this. This, Clara said softly, sitting beside him, is a home. He looked at her. You'd let us go if the judge said so. Her heart cracked at the thought. I would never stop fighting for you, she said, but I would never make you choose between people you love. Ethan's voice broke. I choose you. The words were small, but they carried everything. The day of the hearing arrived cold and clear. The courtroom felt tight and heavy. Margaret stood with her lawyer, polished and confident. Jacob stood tall beside Clara. When it was her turn to speak, Margaret painted a careful picture. A wealthy, educated aunt offering refinement. A widowed father who had rushed into marriage with a desperate woman in need of shelter. Clara felt every eye in the room. Then Jacob was called. I married Miss Bennett because my sons needed guidance, he said steadily. But she became more than that. She became the heart of my home. Margaret's lawyer leaned forward. So you admit the marriage was originally practical? Yes, Jacob said calmly, but love does not always begin loudly. A murmur moved through the courtroom. Then Clara was called. She stood, hands steady at her sides. Why did you marry Mr. Turner? The lawyer asked sharply. Because I needed shelter, she answered honestly. The room stirred. And because his sons needed someone who would not leave. She looked at the judge directly. I did not replace their mother. I honored her. I did not marry for wealth. I married for purpose. I stayed because I chose to stay. Her voice did not shake. They are not wild boys in need of rescue. They are kind, strong children healing from loss. And I love them. The word filled the room. Love, not strategy, not shelter. Love. The judge leaned back, thoughtful. Then something unexpected happened. Ethan stood. No one had called him. May I speak? He asked. The courtroom went silent. The judge nodded carefully. Ethan walked forward, shoulders stiff but brave. She says she wants what's best for us, he said, pointing toward Margaret. But she wasn't there when Caleb had nightmares. And she wasn't there when Pa was too tired to talk. She wasn't there when I thought everyone leaves. His voice wavered, but he kept going. She stayed. Caleb, small but determined, joined him. She sings when it storms, he said quietly. The judge's expression softened. Margaret's composure cracked for the first time. After what felt like hours, the decision came. The court finds no evidence of neglect or instability, the judge said. The boys will remain with their father. A breath Clara did not know she was holding finally escaped. Margaret's face hardened. This is not over, she said sharply as she left. But it was, because the boys ran straight to Clara without hesitation. Back at the ranch that evening, the air felt lighter than it had in months. Jacob stood beside her in the quiet living room once the boys were asleep. I asked you to marry me for practical reasons, he said slowly. I never asked if you wanted more. Clara met his eyes. And now, he said, stepping closer. I cannot imagine this life without you. Not as an agreement. Not as convenience, but as my wife. The word carried weight it had not before. She smiled softly. For a man who claims to be practical, you are speaking like a poet. He almost laughed. I love you, he said. Simple. Clear, but no contract behind it. Her heart felt full in a way shelter alone could never provide. I love you too, she answered. When he kissed her this time, it was not careful or uncertain. It was sure. Outside, the prairie stretched endless beneath the setting sun. Inside the Turner Ranch, laughter echoed freely through halls that once held only silence. Clara had come seeking shelter. Jacob had come seeking help. What they built instead was something neither had expected. A family not formed by need alone, but strengthened by choice. And in the wide, wild land of Colorado, that was worth more than wealth, more than pride, more than protection. It was home.